This is why I say going after waste, fraud, and abuse matters, because if you don't, it just gets more abusive and a lot more expensive. Tonight, I want to depart from form and examine something that has been eating away at me all day. It concerns a huge con job in New York. But I am telling you, this is bigger than just New York, much bigger, because it ain't staying in New York, and it shouldn't be staying in New York. It should wake up taxpayers everywhere, whether they live in New York or not. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and there's got to be a very special place in hell for these guys. Some of New York City's finest destroying it for, well, New York City's finest. Retired cops and firemen accused of a con job so big, so huge, so crass, and so vile that it makes you wonder how any of them got to wear a uniform at all. Some 80 New York Police Department and Fire Department retirees collecting millions of dollars in disability benefits by reportedly faking things like mental illness. But it gets worse. Some of these creeps even pretended that they suffered from trauma working at Ground Zero after 9/11, and they never did. They're among some 106 scammers in all, just arrested in a $400 million Social Security sting that just stinks, and one the New York Post aptly called a ripoff for the history books. But don't focus on their loot. Focus on their lies and how the supposedly bravest among us happily screwed us and their fine colleagues who rightly are held in high regard by us. Like this finger-flipping ex-cop, Glenn Lieberman, featured on the cover of today's New York Post, who reportedly claimed that he suffered from depression and panic attacks, but apparently not enough to keep him off jet skis. Or 49-year-old former cop Richard Constantino, who claimed he was so distraught that he couldn't leave the house, but apparently he could fish off the coast of Costa Rica. Or 60-year-old former policeman Luis Herdado, who similarly took advantage of a disability program, even though he was well enough to reportedly teach karate at a martial arts school. Dozens of cases like these, many more sickening cases like these, dozens of con artists like these, and I still can't get out of my head that half of them shamelessly exploited 9/11 and some sort of traumatic stress they just made up. They were all in the same bogus claims, pocketing up to an extra $50,000 a year in additional benefits that we ended up paying for. And by the way, these guys could be just the tip of the double-dipping dunces. Investigators say that up to 1,000 people were involved in this scam, adding up to that $400 million. Again, think of that, $400 million. That is just one city. That is just one investigation. That is just one scam. You don't think this kind of thing is happening in other cities and other states? Lots of other scams? You don't think that in the trillions of dollars that taxpayers dole out in benefits for God knows what to God knows whom? Some don't rig the system, some don't screw the system, some don't happily screw us, then you must be among those tooting that now legalized pot in some states, because I'm telling you, this is going on in all states, and this warrants full and sweeping investigations in all states by both parties. I'm not saying we stop helping those who need it and deserve it, but we better stop throwing good money after bad to those who just steal it. You know, it is not heartless to pursue this waste. It is clueless not to. And don't say one Larry Wingett didn't warn you. The pit full of personal responsibility says this is what happens when you build an entitlement society. Some feel a little extra entitled. The best-selling author of Grow a Pair says we as taxpayers should grow a pair as well and stop this nonsense. But Larry, we end up not doing that. What do you think?
You're right, we do end up not doing that. Neil, first of all, I want to applaud you for calling out these creeps by name on national television. This is a disgusting story, and it gives a lot of good cops. I have a son who's a cop. It gives a lot of good cops a bad name, and I hate that most of all, probably.
Yeah, they drag them all down. They drag the vast majority of good, especially those who toiled at Ground Zero. It does such a huge disservice to them.
And that's maybe what makes me the maddest about this whole thing. You know, there's a business maxim that says you have to inspect what you expect. We certainly, as taxpayers, should demand that everybody who works for us be inspected periodically. The problem is we don't expect good behavior from people anymore. Thus, we don't get good behavior from people anymore. We live in a society where it's screw the system before the system screws us. We live in a society where it's okay to take advantage of everybody else and not think a thing about us. But you know, the stories like this, These are big stories, and they will eventually be found out. It's not the big stuff that bothers us that's really the problem. It's the little stuff that has stopped bothering us that is going to destroy our country. I bet we had 1 million people today, Neil, call in sick for work when they really just wanted a day off. We have 25% of Americans who cheat on their taxes, and nobody thinks anything about those stories. Those stories teach our kids that it's okay to be dishonest.
Yeah, you know, it's very well put, far better put than I like, about how we can sort of lose our sort of compass, sort of a lie at a time, a little cheating incident at a time. Apparently, in this case, within this investigation, they're finding out that there was a method to getting this money, and one advisor told them how they could get this extra cash was, well, it's sitting out there, it's yours for the asking, and here's how you get it. In other words, you got to act sick, you got to act like you're forgetting things, you got to act confused, you got to look like you're seriously compromised, ill, mentally out of it. This is what you do to get the extra dough, and these guys did it. These guys did it. It's enough to make you vomit.
Yeah, and they've lost their moral compass. I do think that it's just one of the big things that we see in our entire country where we are losing our moral compass. You know, we founded our country in our basic integrity, honesty, a strong work ethic, doing the right thing. We don't value those things anymore, and when we don't get those things, we don't punish them severely enough or publicly enough. These guys should be punished severely and publicly, so we don't set them up as any kind of an example. But this problem, overall, long-term, is not going to be solved legally. It's not going to be solved by government. It's going to be solved by individuals in their homes teaching their kids what their values should be.
Well put, Larry. Well put. Larry Winget.